The morning sun cast soft shadows over the quiet suburban street. A few cars rolled slowly along the asphalt, and the smell of fresh coffee drifted from a nearby diner. The world seemed ordinary, peaceful, calm, predictable. At a corner table of that diner sat a man. Not just any man. Tall, strong-built, with long dark hair tied back and a light beard framing his sharp, observant eyes. He wore a black leather jacket, dark jeans, and black boots. He sipped his green tea, calm, relaxed, completely unaware, or perhaps completely aware, of what was about to unfold. Outside, a rumble began, low at first, then growing louder, shaking the pavement slightly. A group of 6 motorcycles appeared around the corner, engines roaring like a storm approaching the shore. The bikers, leather-clad and covered in tattoos, scanned the street, eyes sharp and predatory. They weren't just passing by, they were looking for trouble. The leader, a towering man with a shaved head and a grin that didn't reach his eyes, nudged his friend. "There," he said, pointing toward the diner. "Easy pick. That guy's sitting alone. He looks weak." The others laughed, revving their engines, confident in the intimidation their presence would cause. Inside, the calm man noticed them, but he didn't flinch. He didn't adjust his jacket or shift nervously in his chair. He simply observed them, taking in every detail, the tattoos, the swagger, the way they scanned the diner like predators. The leader pushed open the diner door, letting in the rumble of engines and the smell of gasoline. The other bikers followed, boots thudding against the wooden floor, each step loud, deliberate, meant to assert dominance. Patrons turned their heads nervously, forks paused midair, and whispers floated through the room. The leader's gaze locked onto the man. "Move," he barked, loud enough to silence the diner. "This table's ours." The calm man set down his cup and looked up slowly. His expression didn't change, his voice didn't rise. "This isn't your table," he said softly, almost as if he were correcting a child, not confronting a group of threatening bikers. The room went silent. Even the youngest patrons sensed something unusual. There was a tension in the air, electric and unsettling. No one spoke. The bikers thought they were about to intimidate an easy target, but the man's calm stare hinted at something far more dangerous than they could imagine. And in that moment, the storm outside the diner was nothing compared to the one about to unfold inside. The sun was dipping low behind the mountains when the rumble of engines shattered the calm outside the diner. 6 massive motorcycles thundered into the gravel lot, kicking up dust like a small storm. Their chrome bodies gleamed, their exhausts growled, and their riders, leather, chains, skull patches, looked like trouble wrapped in denim and attitude. Inside the diner, the atmosphere shifted instantly. People paused mid-bite. A toddler stopped eating fries. Even the cook glanced up from the grill. These weren't normal bikers. These were bullies, the type that looked for someone weaker to push around. Steven Seagal sat at his table, completely still, sipping his green tea. He didn't turn his head when the door slammed open. He didn't react when the bikers stomped inside, laughing loudly, boots thudding like they owned the place. He simply watched their reflections in the stainless steel napkin holder on his table. He already sensed everything he needed to know. The leader, a towering man named Razor, scanned the diner with a smirk. His tattoos stretched across his neck, crawling up his jawline like flames. He carried the kind of swagger that came from years of getting away with intimidation. Behind him followed Tank, Blaze, Wolf, Iron Hand, and Skull, each one more unruly than the last. They didn't come in quietly. They stormed in like they were claiming territory. "Yo!" Razor shouted to the waitress. 6 coffees. Strong. And make it quick. Maria, the waitress, nodded nervously. "Sure thing." Razor's eyes floated around the diner, looking for a target. Bullies always want an audience. They always want someone to look down on. And that's when he spotted Steven, sitting alone. Calm, older, silent. To Razor, that meant easy. To a martial artist, It meant stillness before the storm. Razor bumped Tank with his elbow. "Watch this." The gang snickered. They walked toward Steven's table, boots thudding on the wooden floor. Tank leaned in, whispering just loud enough for everyone to hear. "Look at this old dude. Little sleepy grandpa having his tea." The other bikers laughed. Steven didn't react. Not a twitch. Razor stepped closer, folding his arms. "Hey, you sitting at our table." Steven slowly lifted his eyes, calm, deep, unreadable. "This isn't your table," he said softly. "It belongs to the diner." Razor raised an eyebrow. "What was that? You talking back?" Steven gently set his teacup on the saucer. The quiet click of ceramic on ceramic sounded louder than the biker's laughter. "I'm just sitting here, minding my own business," Steven said. "You should do the same." The bikers burst into loud, mocking laughter. Wolf slapped the table. "Oh, look at him trying to act tough." Ironhand leaned in. "Bet he wets himself if Razor raises his voice." Steven remained absolutely still, but the rest of the diner wasn't as calm. A young couple at the next booth pulled out their phones and began recording. Maria whispered to a customer, "He shouldn't mess with those men." But the customer whispered back, "No, those men shouldn't mess with him." Razor placed his huge hands on Steven's table and leaned down, inches from his face. "You hearing me, old man? This is our spot. Move." Steven stared at him quietly, his voice steady. "This aggression is unnecessary." The bikers cracked up again. Tank pointed at Steven. "Yo, he talks weird. Like one of the meditation monks." Blaze added, "Nah, he talks like he's in a movie." Wolf laughed. "Yeah, what's next? He gonna do karate or something?" Steven didn't correct him. He didn't need to. Razor grabbed the edge of Steven's table and shoved it slightly, making the tea ripple. "Last warning," Razor said. "Get up and give us the table before we make you." Steven didn't blink. "I suggest," Steven said softly, "you take one step back and rethink your choices." That made the bikers explode with laughter once again. Skull shouted, "This guy's got jokes." Tank leaned over to the crowd. "Yo, everyone watching this." He spread his arms wide. "We got a comedian over here." Phones started recording openly now. Someone whispered from the back, "He looks familiar though." But Razor didn't care. He slammed his fist down on the table hard enough to rattle the sugar packets. "You're gonna move now." Steven lifted his teacup again, took a slow sip, and placed it down calmly. "I'm not moving." Silence. For the first time, Razor's smile faded. He wasn't used to someone staying calm around him, especially someone who looked like a random, older customer minding his own business. Razor straightened up, nostrils flaring. "You just made the worst mistake of your life, old man." Steven's eyes narrowed just slightly. "I doubt that." The tension in the diner reached its breaking point. The bikers cracked their knuckles. Razor motioned for his gang to surround the table. People in the diner shifted in their seats. A few stood up, bracing for chaos. The bikers thought they were about to intimidate an old man. They had no clue. They were provoking a legendary fighter. The moment the tallest biker, Tank, stepped off his bike and cracked his knuckles, the entire gas station seemed to fall under his shadow. The engines of the other bikes rumbled like restless animals behind him, each one adding to the pressure in the air. Steven Seagal remained where he was, silent, calm, motionless, as if the chaos around him didn't even exist. But the bikers were just getting started. Tank spat on the ground and took a slow step toward him. "Old man," he growled, "I asked you a question. You deaf or something?" His gang laughed behind him, the sound loud and mocking. A few customers nearby quickly backed away, whispering anxiously. But none dared intervene. After all, this was a group nobody wanted trouble with. Steven merely tilted his head, studying Tank the way a master might study a student attempting their first punch, amused, but not impressed. "I heard you," Steven said slowly, "but you're too angry to listen to yourself. That's your first mistake." The bikers burst into louder laughter. Tank's face flushed with irritation, his pride now fully on the line. He took another hard step forward, his heavy boots thudding against the concrete. You think you're some kind of wise man? Tank sneered. I don't take lessons from strangers, especially not from old guys wearing sunglasses. Stephen didn't flinch. Son, you should take lessons from someone. Might keep you alive longer. Gasps rippled through the onlookers. Even the bikers blinked, momentarily thrown off by the quiet but cutting response. Tank's nostrils flared. You want to act tough? Fine. Let's see how tough you are without that mouth. He jabbed a thick finger against Stephen's chest. Stephen didn't move, but everyone watching did. A couple standing by the vending machines whispered nervously. That guy doesn't know who he's messing with. Are they really going to try to fight him? The tension rose like boiling water ready to spill over. The rest of the biker gang began circling, tightening the space around Stephen. Their boots scraped, their jackets creaked, and their whispers grew darker. One biker leaned toward another. Why is he not scared? Don't know, but it's pissing Tank off. Stephen simply adjusted a small bag of groceries in his hand, his face unreadable. He seemed more concerned about the eggs inside than the 6 angry men around him. Tank, now fully red with fury, let out a short laugh. Look at you, calm like some kind of monk. You know what? Maybe I'll help wake you up. He gave Stephen a hard shove. The crowd gasped as Stephen staggered half a step. Not because he was thrown off balance, but because he allowed himself to move. His sunglasses slipped down his nose a fraction. Tank grinned, mistaking the moment for victory. Now we're talking. You want to swing first, old man? Or should I? Stephen raised one finger. Just one. Son, he said quietly, you don't want to do this. But Tank was beyond listening. The gang hyped him up with whistles and taunts. Teach him a lesson, Tank. Show him who runs the road. Break him. Tank curled his massive fist, the veins bulging. The crowd held its breath. Even the air felt frozen. Stephen's voice cut through the tension like a warm blade. You think being loud makes you strong. True strength doesn't need to shout. The gang exchanged confused looks. What kind of man speaks like this when he's surrounded? What kind of man stands calm when he's being threatened by 6 bikers? Then Tank did exactly what Stephen expected. He swung. A big, wild punch. Full speed, full strength. Aimed right at Stephen's jaw. The kind that would have knocked most men to the ground instantly. But Stephen didn't take the hit. He leaned aside by only a few inches, so smoothly it almost looked like he slid through air. Tank stumbled past him, completely missing. The crowd erupted with shocked murmurs. Did you see that? He barely moved. What just happened? Tank spun around, furious and embarrassed. Lucky, he barked. Do that again. Stephen sighed softly, not in fear, in disappointment. You boys think the world bends for you, he said. But it bends for discipline, not ego. Tank charged again, and again. Stephen avoided the attack with effortless fluidity. He didn't strike back. He didn't even lift his hands. He was simply untouchable, moving with a calmness that made the bikers even angrier. One biker shouted, "He's playing with you, Tank." Another pushed forward, yelling, "We'll all take him." Stephen turned his head slightly, his sunglasses catching the sunlight. That was the breaking point. The gang tightened their circle, ready to rush all at once. The crowd braced, expecting the worst. And right before the chaos could explode, Stephen spoke again, quiet, controlled, but carrying the weight of a man who had seen 1,000 battles. One more step, and you're going to regret it. The words hit the bikers harder than any punch, because something in his voice, steady, cold, absolutely certain, made even the boldest of them hesitate. But Tank didn't stop. Not yet. Tank's boots pounded the pavement as he lunged forward again, fueled by humiliation and blind rage. His gang shouted behind him, the noise swelling like a war cry. The gas station trembled with tension. Even the birds in the nearby trees seemed to go silent, sensing something dangerous in the air. But Seagal still didn't flinch. He stood in the center of the biker circle, relaxed, breathing slow, his face calm like he'd faced storms far deadlier than this. Tank swung another wild punch, faster this time, fueled by desperation. Steven shifted his weight, letting the punch skim the air an inch from his cheek. The motion was so smooth and fluid, it looked choreographed. No wasted energy. No panic. No effort. The crowd watching froze in disbelief. "Who moves like that?" someone whispered. "He's not normal, man," another murmured. Tank didn't care. His pride was boiling. "Stop moving and fight," he roared. Steven finally lifted his eyes toward him, the slightest hint of disappointment in his expression. "Son, fighting is the last thing you want." The gang's patience snapped. 3 bikers rushed him at once. One tried grabbing him from the side. Another reached for his shirt. A third aimed a fast elbow toward his ribs. It all happened in a blur. But Steven moved faster. A twist, a sidestep, a shift of balance. And suddenly, crack. One biker was on his knees, clutching his shoulder. "HHH, my arm." Thud. Another biker stumbled backward, confused at how quickly he'd been flipped onto the ground. The third froze, mid-attack, not understanding how Steven had slipped past all of them without even looking like he tried. Gasps rippled through the entire station. "He didn't hit them," a woman said, astonished. "He just moved and they fell." Steven adjusted the sleeves of his jacket calmly. "Control," he said softly. Not aggression. But Tank only grew more infuriated watching his men fall apart around him. "This ain't real," one biker muttered, backing away. "Nobody fights like this." But an older man fueling his truck suddenly stepped forward, eyes wide. "I know exactly who fights like that." Everyone turned toward him. "That's Steven Seagal." The bikers blinked in confusion. "Steven who?" "You idiots," the man hissed. "The Steven Seagal. Martial artist. Aikido master. Action star. Law enforcement trainer. The guy who's been taking down armed criminals since before you were born." The gang froze. Even Tank hesitated mid-step. The realization hit them like a punch to the gut. The man continued, voice louder now, the crowd leaning in. "This is the guy who trained special forces in multiple countries. The guy who can put a man twice his size on the ground without breaking a sweat. The guy whose whole life is martial arts." A wave of murmurs spread across the crowd. I knew he looked familiar. No wonder he wasn't scared. That explains everything. Tank's face drained of color. He had no idea. Not a clue. Steven lowered his sunglasses just enough for Tank to see his eyes. Tank instantly froze. Those eyes weren't angry. They weren't threatened. They were calm. Dead calm. The kind of calm only men with decades of discipline and danger carry. "You're Steven Seagal," Tank muttered, suddenly unsure, suddenly small. Steven raised one eyebrow. "Now you're listening." The gang began to back away instinctively. Their earlier confidence evaporated like smoke in the wind. One biker whispered, "Dude, we tried to jump a martial arts legend." Tank swallowed hard. "Why didn't you say anything?" Steven shrugged lightly. "Didn't need to." Tank finally broke. All that fake swagger melted into embarrassment and fear. "Look, man, we didn't know who you were." Steven stepped closer, not threatening, but towering with a silent authority that made Tank stumble backward. "Respect isn't about who someone is," Steven said quietly. "It's about who you are." Tank looked down, shame flooding his face. Steven continued, his voice steady. "You judged me, intimidated me, tried to attack me, not because I did anything wrong, but because you wanted to feel strong." Tank's jaw trembled. I'm sorry." His gang exchanged uncomfortable glances. Some nodded, some avoided eye contact, all of them humbled. Steven let the silence sit for a moment. Then he said the words none of them expected. "Strength isn't about hurting people. It's about protecting them." The crowd actually applauded. Some people even recorded the moment, their phones up and flashing. Tank took a shaky breath. "We'll leave you alone. We'll get out of here." Steven nodded slightly. "Good. And take your men with you before someone gets hurt. Preferably not by me." The gang scrambled toward their bikes. tripping over their own feet in their hurry to escape. Tank turned his engine on, avoiding everyone's eyes. His earlier confidence was gone, replaced with a hard, humbling lesson he would remember forever. As they roared away, Stephen picked up his groceries from the curb, brushed off a speck of dust, and began walking back toward his car as calmly as he began. The station was silent. Then, someone shouted, "Legend!" The crowd erupted in cheers. And Stephen simply smiled, the quiet smile of a man who didn't need applause, because he already knew exactly who he was. The rumble of the bikers' engines faded into the distance, but the tension they left behind still hung heavy in the air. The crowd remained frozen, unsure if the moment was truly over. Steven Seagal stood calmly beside his car, placing his groceries inside with the same quiet precision he used against Tank and his gang. But the scene wasn't finished. One biker had not left. The youngest of the group, barely in his 20s, stood near the edge of the parking lot, helmet in his hands, staring at Stephen with wide, conflicted eyes. He wasn't the loud one. He wasn't the aggressive one. He had been following the group, but he clearly wasn't built for chaos. He slowly approached, voice trembling. "Sir, can I talk to you?" The crowd murmured, curious. Stephen closed his trunk and turned to face him. "You're not here for a fight. What do you want?" The young biker swallowed hard. I didn't know. I didn't know who you were. I didn't want to attack you. I just go along with them because I'm scared to stand alone." Stephen studied him for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "What's your name, son?" "Eddie," the biker whispered. Stephen nodded once. "Eddie, you don't seem like the type who enjoys hurting people." Eddie's voice cracked. "I'm not. Tank, he just takes over everything. We follow him because, well, everyone else does." Stephen stepped closer, not threatening, but grounding. "You followed him because it felt easier than thinking for yourself." Eddie looked away in shame. The crowd listened silently as Stephen continued. "Being part of a group doesn't make you strong. Courage comes from standing alone when everyone else is doing the wrong thing." Eddie blinked, the words hitting him deeper than any punch. Stephen walked past him, gesturing for the young man to follow. They stopped near the center of the parking lot, where Tank had first shoved him. Stephen pointed to the ground. "Right here," Stephen said calmly. "You had a choice. You could have stopped them, or at least refused to join in." Eddie's shoulders sagged. "I wanted to, but I was scared. They would have laughed at me." Stephen's voice softened, but his words cut sharp. "Better to be laughed at than to become a bully yourself." Eddie froze, jaw trembling. "And listen to me carefully," Stephen added, his tone deepening with the weight of years of wisdom. "A man who lets others push him into violence is not a man. He's a puppet." The entire crowd went silent. Eddie breathed shakily, the truth sinking in. "I don't want to be that. I don't want to be like Tank." Stephen placed a steady hand on Eddie's shoulder. "Then stop following boys pretending to be men. Learn discipline, learn respect, and learn when to walk away." Eddie nodded, tears threatening to fall. "I'm sorry, Mr. Seagal. Truly." "You're young," Stephen replied. "You can change. Decide who you want to be, and start today." Eddie wiped his face, then turned toward his bike. But before leaving, he stopped again. "Can I ask how you stayed so calm, with all of them surrounding you?" Stephen gave a faint smile. "Because panic is what they wanted. Calm is what they feared." Eddie stared at him in awe. "You aren't scared of anything, are you?" Stephen chuckled softly. "I've been scared plenty of times. But real strength is doing what's right, even when fear is there." Eddie nodded slowly, absorbing every word. He put on his helmet, started his bike, and rode off. Not with the gang's thunderous swagger, but quietly, thoughtfully, like someone heading toward a new life. The crowd, still gathered, erupted into applause once again. Some people approached Stephen for photos or handshakes, but he waved them off politely. "I'm no hero," he said, "just a man who believes in respect." A middle-aged woman stepped forward, her voice trembling with relief. "Thank you for standing up to them. They've caused trouble here for months. Stephen looked at her, then at the gas station owner who nervously lingered near the door. Call the local authorities, Stephen said. Tell them exactly who these boys are. Maybe they'll finally take action. The owner nodded. Yes, sir. Stephen took a slow breath, letting the tension drain from his shoulders. The danger was gone, but the air still buzzed with the energy of what had just unfolded. One man approached cautiously and said, Sir, you handled them without throwing a single punch. Stephen's smile returned, faint but meaningful. A master controls the fight before it begins. The crowd reacted with impressed murmurs. He glanced in the direction the bikers had fled. They came here looking to prove something, he said. Now they've learned something instead. As Stephen walked back to his car, someone shouted, Teach us, Stephen. Tell us one thing we should remember. He paused, turned slightly, and delivered the line that stopped the entire station in its tracks. Strength isn't how hard you hit, it's how wisely you stand. With that, he got into his car, closed the door gently, and drove away, leaving behind a group of strangers who would never forget the lesson they had witnessed. But the story wasn't over, because the world was about to find out what happened next. The sun dipped lower on the horizon as Steven Seagal's car disappeared down the road. The gas station slowly returned to life, but the shock of what happened still pulsed through everyone's veins. People looked at each other in disbelief, still replaying the scene over and over in their minds. But the moment Stephen drove off, the phones came out, and that's when the story truly began. Dozens of bystanders had recorded everything, from Tank's first shove to the lightning-fast takedowns. And by the time the first video hit social media, everything exploded. The video goes viral instantly. A teenager who had filmed the whole confrontation posted it with the caption, Bully bikers tried to jump a random guy, then realized he was Steven Seagal, flushed face fire. Within minutes, notifications started blowing up. 10,000 views, 50,000 views, 100,000 views. Comments poured in like a flood. Brew, he didn't even try, and they still got wrecked skull. That's what happens when you pick a fight with a legend. Respect to Stephen for staying calm the whole time. The video spread across Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, every platform imaginable. Celebrities reposted it. Martial artists analyzed it. Even law enforcement pages commented on Stephen's technique. But while the internet celebrated, the bikers were in trouble. Local authorities take action. Back at the gas station, the owner had already called the sheriff. Within half an hour, 2 patrol cars pulled up, lights flashing. Officers interviewed every witness, gathering statements, reviewing the videos. Tank's name came up repeatedly. He's been starting fights for months. He threatened people, scared families. He always rides with that gang. When the sheriff saw the footage, his face hardened. These boys crossed the line this time. A warrant was issued immediately for harassment, attempted assault, and disturbing the peace. And Stephen didn't even need to be there for justice to unfold. A few miles down the highway, Tank and his gang stopped at a diner. They were trying to shake off the humiliation, pretending it didn't happen. Tank slammed his helmet on the table. That old dude embarrassed us. No, one biker snapped. You embarrassed us. Tank glared. What's that supposed to mean? It means, the biker said, pointing at his buzzing phone. Everyone knows what happened. Tank grabbed the phone. There it was. The video. Millions of views. Thousands of comments mocking them. Tank's face turned pale. The youngest biker, Eddie, stepped outside alone. He didn't want to be part of this anymore. Stephen's words kept echoing in his head. Better to be laughed at than to become a bully. And he realized he finally wanted to stop following the wrong people. Minutes later, the sheriff's patrol car pulled up. Tank tried to walk out the back, but the officers blocked him. Tank Jefferson, the sheriff said sternly, you're under arrest. The diner went silent. One officer added, and we've got all the proof we need. It's all over the internet. Tank didn't fight back this time. There was no victory left in him, only shame. The rest of the gang scattered, but the sheriff warned. We'll be speaking to each of you. Don't make us come looking." Eddie stepped forward nervously. I want to help. I want to tell the truth." The sheriff looked at him. "You were there?" "Yes, but I didn't want to hurt anyone." "Good. Then you're doing the right thing now." For the first time all day, Eddie felt like he had made the right choice. Stephen learns what happened. Later that evening, Stephen sat quietly on his porch, sipping tea, enjoying the peace of nature. His phone buzzed with notifications, hundreds of them, but he ignored most of them. Fame didn't impress him. Virality didn't interest him. He had lived a lifetime of battles. He didn't need applause. But then, an officer he knew personally called. "Stephen, just wanted you to know, we picked up Tank and his boys. They won't be bothering anyone for a long time." Stephen nodded calmly. "Good. They needed a lesson." "Oh, and Stephen," the officer added, "you're trending worldwide." Again, Stephen chuckled softly. "I figured that would happen." He leaned back, watching the sunset fade over the horizon. "People aren't praising you because you fought," the officer said. "They're praising you because you didn't fight unless you had to." Stephen's voice was calm. "That's the way it should always be. The world reacts." By nightfall, the video had reached 20 million views. News channels picked it up. Biker gang humbled by martial arts legend. Steven Seagal teaches real strength through calm. Interviews flooded the gas station owner's phone. Self-defense instructors used the footage as a teaching tool. Even schools shared it, teaching students about confidence and discipline. Comments kept rolling in. Steven Seagal is still the GOAT. This is what real martial arts looks like. He protected himself without hurting anyone. But among all the reactions, one stood out. Eddie, the young biker, made a post that went viral on its own. "I met Steven Seagal today. He didn't just stop a fight. He changed my life." People praised him for choosing a better path. And Eddie promised to never ride with Tank's group again. The world took a lesson. Not about punches, not about violence, but about self-control. Steven Seagal had shown millions of people that power isn't about dominance. It's about discipline, wisdom, respect. And while the internet celebrated the spectacle, Steven simply sat outside, drinking his tea, letting the world talk. Because true masters don't need to speak loudly. Their actions speak for them. By sunrise the next morning, the world had already transformed the gas station incident into a global movement. Millions of people across countless countries woke up to the video of Steven Seagal standing calm, centered, and unshaken in the middle of 6 hostile bikers. But what struck people wasn't just the way he handled the gang. It was the way he handled himself. No anger, no ego, no need to prove anything. That, people agreed, was the true definition of strength. The world responds. News anchors discussed it with excitement. This was a masterclass in self-control. He disarmed anger with calm. He gave a lesson without throwing a punch. Influential figures chimed in. A respected martial arts instructor posted, "What Steven Seagal demonstrated is the highest level of mastery, victory without violence." A world-famous motivational speaker wrote, "Confidence isn't loud. Real power is quiet." Even parents shared the clip with their kids, saying, "This is how you stand up for yourself without becoming the problem." The incident became more than a viral video. It became a symbol of calm strength. Eddie's transformation. Meanwhile, Eddie, the youngest biker, sat in his small room, staring at the ceiling long after the night had passed. His mind replayed Steven's words over and over. Strength isn't about hurting people. It's about protecting them. A man who lets others push him into violence is not a man. He's a puppet. Choose who you want to be. Start today. Those words struck deeper than anything he had ever heard, deeper than any punishment the law could give. Eddie knew he had to make a decision. So that morning, he walked into the sheriff's office voluntarily. Not because anyone forced him, but because he wanted to start a new path. "I want to give a full statement," he said. "I want to do the right thing." The sheriff, who had already seen the viral clip, nodded approvingly. "That's a good first step, son." After finishing, Eddie made another choice, an even bigger one. He went to a local martial arts dojo. The instructor raised an eyebrow when Eddie walked in, still wearing the worn-out biker vest. "You here for trouble?" the instructor asked. Eddie shook his head. "No, sir. I'm here because I want to learn how to control myself. I want to learn what that man, Steven Seagal, knows." The instructor studied him, then smiled. "Then take off the vest," he said. "You're not that person anymore." Eddie did. And with that single action, he took his first step toward becoming something better. Steven's final message. Later that week, Steven was invited on a talk show after the incident dominated global headlines. He usually avoided interviews, but this time he agreed. Not for fame, not for attention, but because the world clearly needed a message. The interviewer leaned forward. "Steven, millions of people are calling you a hero. Do you feel like one?" Steven shook his head. "I'm no hero. I'm a man who believes in control." The interviewer nodded. "What do you want people to learn from what happened?" Steven looked into the camera, calm, firm, unwavering. "I want people to understand something simple," he said. "Fear makes people loud. Ego makes people violent. But calm makes you untouchable." The studio fell silent. Steven continued. "You don't win fights by throwing punches. You win them by staying centered, by refusing to be dragged into chaos." The interviewer swallowed. "And what about the bikers? Do you forgive them?" Steven nodded once. "Of course. They acted out of ignorance. Not evil." He leaned forward slightly. "But forgiveness doesn't mean weakness. It means strength that doesn't need revenge." The audience erupted into applause. And the clip, like everything else he had said that week, went viral instantly. A lesson that stuck with the world. By the end of the week, schools were teaching the clip. Martial arts dojos were analyzing it. People everywhere repeated Steven's message. Calm makes you untouchable. Eddie continued training, determined never to fall into darkness again. Tank and the gang faced their consequences, but they avoided jail time thanks to Steven's request for leniency. Steven himself went back to living quietly, far from the noise of the internet. But the world would not forget what he showed them. That real strength isn't in fists. It's in restraint. And sometimes, one calm man can stop 6 angry men and teach millions more.